So I am delighted to introduce to you the National Lottery Heritage Fund, who I'm sure you probably have all heard of, but now we actually get the chance to hear from the people who make it happen. So I'm delighted to introduce Alistair Brown, who is Head of Museums, Libraries and Archives Policy, and Beth Bryan, Senior Engagement Manager from the National Lottery Heritage Fund. This session is being recorded and you'll be able to watch it back later if you want to take notes or you want to watch it back after the show. That will follow up in the next few days and weeks. So hand over to Beth and you guys, up to you.
Hello everyone. Really good to see you here this afternoon. So, as you've just heard, my name's Alistair Brown. I'm the Head of Museums, Libraries and Archives Policy at the National Lottery Heritage Fund.
And I'm Beth Bryan, one of our Senior Engagement Managers for the National Lottery Heritage Fund.
And we're going to talk to you today about the National Lottery Heritage Fund's work, and we're going to particularly focus in on one specific area of our 10-year strategy, Heritage 2033, that we think is going to be of particular interest to the sector at the moment, and that's around organisational sustainability, and I think it very much fits in with the theme of this theatre today. And what we'll do is we'll just start with a short presentation, and then afterwards there'll be the standard opportunity for a Q&A as well. Just before we get into the detail of kind of the organisational sustainability theme, I just thought it would be useful to give you a quick reminder of who we are and what we do. Many of you will know all about the National Lottery Heritage Fund already. Some of you will have worked on projects that we've funded or in museums that we've helped to fund the building of or the restoration of. But a quick primer, we're an arm's length body of government, and we are the largest single funder of heritage in the United Kingdom. Our funding comes from National Lottery players, our unending thanks to them. We are one of several distributors of the money that the National Lottery raises for good causes. But we obviously have a core focus on heritage. And our definition of heritage is very broad. We think of it as anything that people want to preserve from the past and carry forward to the future. And that means that we fund across sectors, including museums, libraries and archives, but also built heritage, natural heritage, intangible cultural heritage, and many other things as well. We've provided more than £9.5 billion of funding to the heritage sector since we were founded in 1994, and almost £2.5 billion of that has gone to the museums, libraries and archives sector itself. So a really huge investment in the sector. I think the other thing that I just wanted to mention in this sort of recap is that we're a project funder. It's a really useful thing to remember. We provide additional funding to help heritage organisations do more than they normally would. We don't provide core or revenue funding for organisations in the long term, and that's going to be relevant to our discussion today. The other important thing before we get going is about our work at the moment is, and I mentioned it already, our 10-year strategy, Heritage 2033. This strategy defines all of our funding decisions over the course of the 10 years that it's running for, and under Heritage 2033, the really important thing that you need to know is that applicants for our funding need to demonstrate how projects are going to deliver against 4 investment principles. And those are the 4 investment principles there on screen, and just very briefly, they are saving heritage, which is about conserving and valuing heritage for now and the future, protecting the environment, which is obviously about supporting nature recovery and environmental sustainability, inclusion, access and participation, and then that last one, organisational sustainability. All those investment principles are equally important, and an applicant might come to us with a project that relates more strongly to one of them than to the others. But today, we want to focus on that last one that I mentioned, that investment principle around organisational sustainability. So, why focus on organisational sustainability? Well, quite simply because we want to see museums and heritage organisations thrive. We want the huge number of museums and heritage organisations that we have invested in over the past 30 years to be in a robust financial and organisational health, so that you can meet the needs of your visitors and the communities that you serve and provide access to the amazing heritage that you hold. And we recognize that this is challenging for many organizations at the moment. You know, we've heard a lot in sessions here and yesterday as well about the difficult times that the sector's facing. Some of the factors that are contributing to that we're very conscious of: local government cuts, the long journey back from COVID and the closures that entails, the cost of living crisis, skills shortages, repairs backlogs, governance gaps, volunteering, difficulties with volunteer hiring. They all play their part in making this a difficult period for many organizations in the sector. And we know that actually lots of leaders feel that their organizations are now quite vulnerable to further shocks. But trying to find the optimistic take on this, we also know that there are lots of positives for the sector out there. And if you saw Bernard speak yesterday, you'll have heard his take on this. But at the macro level, museum visits are rebounding post-COVID. So the DCMS participation survey shows that in England, 46% of adults last year visited a museum at least once in 23-24. That was up from 35% the previous year. So that's an 11-point leap in a single year. That's something to really take heart from. And that recovery, uneven though it might be, it shows the strong appeal that museums still have for people across the country and at every age group as well. There is still huge interest in museums and in the heritage that we care for. So there are other things to take heart from, I think, as well. The high level of trust that people have in museums and as institutions, and also the strong emotional connection that people feel towards them. And there's been some really interesting research around that as well from Art Fund and the Association of Independent Museums. So there are significant opportunities for organizations here to make themselves more resilient, even in the face of those kind of wider economic difficulties. Sorry. We're good? So just moving on to then, what do we actually mean when we use the term organizational sustainability? Well, our strategy sets out a view of organizational sustainability, and I'd really recommend that you have a look at the strategy itself and a bit more of the writing around it. But what it fundamentally says is that we will support organizations to develop skills and capacity to ensure a sound, long-term future and encourage new heritage investment that benefits communities and economies. So this is all about putting organizations on a sound footing, able to continue preserving heritage and serving communities for the long term. That's easy to say, but for many this is the biggest challenge that they face. So it's really important to say at this stage that we at the Heritage Fund don't have all the answers. And equally important to say that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to organizational sustainability. There certainly isn't an archetypal organizational sustainability project that we're looking to fund. And that's for a good reason. There are over 2,500 museums in the UK with huge diversity in terms of with huge diversity in terms of collections, buildings, visitors, location, etc. And that means that the issues that are affecting town centre, local authority museums will be very different to those affecting rural independent museums, for example. But broadly speaking, we can think about two areas that underpin organizational sustainability that will be relevant for everyone. And those are first around direct financial support, which is obvious, but can be then further divided into subcategories of earned income, philanthropic giving, regular public funding, and then project-based public funding, which is where we play a role. Diversifying income so that you're receiving support across various different sources is becoming increasingly important in underpinning your organization's resilience. And the second area is around operational strengthening and operational sustainability. That's more about ensuring that the organizations have the appropriate plans, skills and advice, that they have the community and political support as well, and fundamentally the strong core visitor offer, which enable them to deliver their mission. So fundamentally, organizational sustainability is about identifying the actions that you need to take to deliver your organization's mission and to preserve your heritage in the long term. And at this stage, I'm going to hand over to Beth, who's going to talk a bit more about the sort of the practical actions that museums and heritage organizations are taking to support their sustainability, and hopefully give you a bit more of an idea of what organizations are doing and what case studies we can learn from.
Thanks so much, Alistair. There we go. So it should be no surprise that how your project or organization addresses this investment principle will be highly individualized, as no two organizations are the same in their needs or their starting point. I've had some conversations with some of you in this room, which is great to see. I can guarantee you all look very, very different. So that's really important to look at what's unique to you. It's most important in an application to tell us that you need to ask us for what you need, and it's clear that what you're asking for is not just going to be, say, a stopgap or addressing something that's just an urgent short-term project, but it's going to be a true step change for your organization in terms of resilience and long-term sustainability. This should be relevant to the scope of the project, as well as proportionate to the scale of the grant request. So remember, the more that you ask for, the more that we're going to be looking to see for this. Organizations that are looking to strengthen their organizational sustainability might consider investing in activities such as business and strategy planning, digital skills, audience development or marketing. It could be governance, fundraising, social investment opportunities, capital improvements, or even mergers and consolidations. There's quite a range of what we can fund in this space. It's important to note that there are many areas of work with communities and collections that are important to overall organizational sustainability. For us, ensuring that the collections are efficient and well managed, or developing strong community and educational offers, can be as important as what a museum is doing with its shop, its cafe, or its restaurant. When considering how your project will address this investment principle, particularly a project with a major focus on this investment principle, we encourage you to address your starting point through something like a SWOT or a resilience diagnostic tool, or there's other analysis tools online that can kind of help you guide your thinking in this area. So we want to give you a few examples of where organizations have thought carefully about sustainability in their applications to us and have gone on to develop stronger resilience to meet that specific needs through our funding. The first one, some of you will already be familiar with the Birmingham Museums Trust project to create Citizens Jury, and if you aren't, I'd recommend going to their in-depth session later this afternoon on it. This was a project that was funded called Laying the Foundations, which was helping BMT to answer the question, what does Birmingham need and want from its museums, both now and in the future, and how can Birmingham's Museums Trust make these things happen? It was about a major step change to ensure that direction that they were going in would maintain and expand their audiences for an outwardly looking path to long-term sustainability. They created a representative jury chosen at random from across the city, and together they looked in detail at the issues facing the museum. What has emerged is in part democratic exercise, part audience development plan, and it will be really crucial for BMT as they plan for the future and make the case with their stakeholders. Just so you understand kind of the well-roundedness of this, there are other approved purposes delivered through this investment, such as an organizational review, new fundraising, business, income diversification, and communication strategies developed with it, support organizational cultural change and workforce skills such as digital, so focusing internally on how they were delivering this as well as audience research into new and existing audiences specifically, and developing that theory of change to kind of help them monitor and evaluate this process that they were going through. But what's appropriate for BMT as a large local authority museum may not be the same for others, and we know that these needs are diverse and widespread. So the second case study I'll talk about today is Bowes Museum. So this is delivering more on the financial resilience side. Bowes Museum was awarded $163,000 under our previous strategy for their resilience through investment in people and business project. They tailored their request to their specific needs. They started by using a heritage strength checker, which identified particular areas to improve. For them, that was about audience development, financial, and organizational structure. The project included extensive audience research to develop a new audience development plan to be more relevant and accessible to audiences, as well as capitalize on some potential income generation activities with those audiences. It had a financial management review, including improvements to the team's business acumen skills, as well as a more robust financial process and a new business plan. And finally, it also had a review of the organizational structure to assess and assets to develop a new training plan and facility strategy. So how can the assets that they had generate some more income for them? Looking at kind of options appraisals within that. This was delivered in large part through professional consultant support, so it's also really important to remember to factor in the resources and the skills that are needed to achieve your project that you might not already have. The findings from this project and identified in the evaluation led to the development of their next application to us, which is called Towards Bows 2092, which was recently successfully awarded, and that focuses on filling some of those remaining gaps, such as their fundraising strategy and more work in their digital skills. The last case study I'll run through today is Marks Memorial Library in London. They took an opportunity presented by their 90th anniversary to really pause, take stock, and have a considered point to determine their new direction and plan properly for the resources they would need to deliver upon that. Their vision was to be more resilient by establishing stronger business plans and a dynamic engagement strategy. It also crucially invested in the heritage needs of their building, exploring the feasibility for future capital development. It included extensive audience research into targeted underserved audiences, which for them in particular was looking at schools and young people. They knew they weren't coming and they knew there was real scope to engage with them further. More resilient governance through training for trustees and staff, and establishing an outreach and engagement advisory group, so looking at how they were actually governing themselves. And they had fundraising feasibility and asset-based income generation possibilities, and developing a conservation management plan to assess the needs and potential. So they wanted to make sure that any potential capital request to us was really looking at both what the heritage needs of the building were, but also what the needs of their new audiences were. The project provided important evidence and answers to barriers to access, physically as well as intellectually, that informed their recent successful expression of interest for a capital project within our LARDS grants program. So in terms of conclusions, we hope that these examples have got you kind of thinking about your own organization and the opportunities for strengthening your specific position. Some key takeaways are to remember that this is not about solving short-term challenges, but meaningful and sustainable changes to your organization. This is an important issue given the pressures facing the sector we know, but as Alistair laid out, there are reasons to be optimistic as well and opportunities to seize. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to improving organizational sustainability, and we do not have in any way a specific formula that we would be asking you to fit within any of our investment principles. And also, lastly, we want you to consider the gaps in your delivery. So this is really specific that I want you to kind of think about when you go away today, which is what are the issues that are holding you back specifically? What are the interventions that would help you become more sustainable? And how does that link back to your own mission and heritage that you preserve? And as I said, SWOT analysis or some online diagnostic tools can really help you get that thinking together as a team. And then here's a really important slide if you want to take that away and actually come to us with a grant request. You're not alone. As well as the brilliant informal networks and supports that exist across our sector, there's also lots of great guidance and support to help you deal with these issues. We have good practice guidance on organizational sustainability that's on our website, and a huge amount of support and tools were developed as part of our recent business skills and enterprise program with partners who are experts in various areas of business skills, fundraising, and audience development. Specifically for our 10,000 to 250,000 open grant program, which comprises the majority of the projects that we fund, we have online our grant guidance where you can look at the eligibility, all of the requirements, and you can also view all of the application questions prior to starting your application. If that's the route you're going down, I highly encourage you to utilize our project inquiry form, or what we call our PEF service, where you can submit details of your proposal for feedback, and that's received typically within 10 working days by a member of the team. There is no minimum requirement for the stage that a project idea has to be in to submit a PEF, but as a general rule, the more details you give us, the more detailed your feedback will be able to be. We also run free monthly webinars that outline our new strategy, the investment principles in a lot more detail, as well as the step-by-step application process for this level of funding. This is really, really crucial. I think particularly if this is your first time or you haven't applied to us in a while, that is a really great resource to utilize. And they can be booked free by a ticket source, searching the National Lottery Heritage Fund Helping You Apply webinar. And one last note is that projects are assessed within in competition with other projects that we've received from the same region. So please do get in touch with your local engagement team. That can be done either through the PEF process or finding your local engagement team using our website in the area marked in your area. And you can also see projects that we funded near you on here. This is important so that you can kind of understand the local context, what competition is looking like, and how they can best support you in your area. Thanks very much, and I think we'll be taking questions now.
Thank you, Alistair and Beth. Are there any questions for Alistair and Beth? I've got a question to kick us off. If you could say there was one thing which trips organisations up in their applications, which you would say to particularly be mindful of, you've given a few examples there. Is there one bit of advice you would say to pay attention to this particular area where some people maybe trip up?
I think one thing, and I think hopefully it came through a bit in the presentation as well, is if we know that organisations are facing pressures and sometimes that becomes quite acute, but don't leave it too late. Don't leave it till things are in crisis mode to come to us and start having a conversation. And I would say that applies to us, but it also applies to your museum's development teams, if you're getting funding from Arts Council, to your Arts Council relationship manager and so on. I think that's really important.
I'll add one more thing. I think really sometimes people can forget that we are the Heritage Fund and that what we are focusing on in our remit is the heritage need. So one kind of trick in checking your narrative answers is being really clear, what is the heritage need that you're asking us to fund? Is it at risk? Tell us in as much detail about that. And then check all the rest of your answers, just to sense check yourself. Is what you're proposing going to deliver against that heritage need? And how do you know? I know it sounds really simple, but it is a nice little trick. And avoid buzzwords. Specificity is really important. I've got some of our investment colleagues over here, and I'm sure they would give me a slap on the wrist if I didn't say, please be as specific as possible.
Great advice. Any questions?
Thank you so much for your time and great talk, really great to be here. I hope this is not too tangential, but talking about organizational sustainability alongside the three other areas of your 2033 strategy, how much can you, I know there's no sort of hard and fast rule here, but say for instance, the point about protecting the environment, I'm sure there are some heritage organizations that will not be in a position to really make too much of an impact in that sort of area. So in terms of the spread, is it such that organizational stability is quite high up, or what sort of emphasis would you place in terms of what's best to go and emphasize?
Sorry, I don't want to hear myself. We get questions a lot specifically about protecting the environment from sectors such as yourself where that's not a very active point. I promise you we're not asking you to solve climate change with £10,000 grant. That's not really what we're in the business of doing. For that investment principle in specific, what I'd encourage you really to do is look at mitigation. So how are you planning your project now in 2025 in a way that's different and considering climate, the impacts to climate that maybe we weren't doing in 1999 or even in 2008, for example. So that could be things around public transportation or how you're looking at the materials that you use, where you're sourcing them. If it's a capital project, what are the new ways around environment management and collections management system that would be a greener source of that. But in general, in terms of like the spread, we are looking, 10 years is quite a long time, and we will be investing in all of these areas. But one of the reasons that we were looking at investment principles rather than our previous outcomes base is to have less of a formula and an idea from the get-go. So we really do want to respond to what those needs are, and they will be changing from year to year, and it's up to us to kind of monitor which areas that is being invested in. So please do just focus on your heritage need and work out how that relates to the investment principles. Don't try and fit, I want one that has 75% this. Just really focus on what you need and see where it naturally fits. And if you're really struggling with an investment principle, that can be something that when you put through, say, a project inquiry form, that the engagement team can kind of direct you to some resources to get you some thinking around that.
Yeah, I'd completely agree with that. Those investment principles, as I said at the beginning, you can lean in much more heavily to one than to the others on that list if that's where your need and your heritage need is. It's not 4 boxes that you have to tick and that you have to tick off equally. That's not how it's designed. So yeah.
Any more questions?
Can you hear me? Yes, even I can hear myself. I'm going to ask you a question that possibly is on the website anyway, so it's a very naive one. But do you have an anticipated turnaround time? So the time from which you receive a full application, not the initial thing, to a determination and then the money flowing back to the applicant? And I asked this question from the point of planning, matching funding, even if it's not a match for this specifically, but it's a complementary activity.
Yep, happy to answer that one. So for the medium level program, that's 10,000 to 250,000. We aim to return responses within 8 weeks. Now, depending on the current volume and levels of competition, so particularly I focus in London and South, and we've got quite a high volume, we're advising applicants to really factor in for your project plan, 12 to kind of 16 weeks to receive your application. But remember, if you've ever had an award from us, you'll receive the decision, but then you need to follow up with that permission to start. So always giving yourself more of a buffer, but we do try and keep a relatively quick turnaround. And what's important that we didn't say there either is we don't have any deadlines for the medium program, so please do apply when you're ready. That is a rolling decision-making process.
Did I see a hand over here? Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much, both, and for the whole talk. It's a kind of competition type question. It's something about organisational resilience. Quite often we've talked a lot in this theatre, particularly about needing to bring out your income streams and think about how you're upselling everything. So for some of us, I think the organisational resilience is about making those things stronger, not necessarily directly about saving the heritage. It's obviously something that kind of comes as a result of being a strong organisation, but it isn't directly in that application. And obviously, quite a lot of heritage organisations are struggling to do just that, to look after their heritage. And how does that kind of balance itself out in the grand scheme of what we're talking about with this grant particularly?
Yeah, great question. So I would say managing your heritage effectively is really, really important to us. We don't want, as Alice has said, wait for the last minute. So it's not that is not important. It's about how you tell us about it. So one of the things that we would say is, why does this project have to happen now? What is going to happen if this project doesn't happen now? Being really clear to us about what the risk is specifically for you, and then that's one of the ways that we look at competition and assess. So I wouldn't focus so much on competition as long as your answers are as clear as possible around what is the heritage need that you're focusing on, and being able to long-term manage sustainably heritage is something that we are looking at and we know is a really urgent need. So it's not just that this mirror is cracked and crumbling. That's a really bad example, sorry. The roof is leaking is another really, really common one. So it's not just that. It's all about this kind of business plans have changed. COVID has really changed things. Cost of living crisis has changed things. There's all these kinds of reasons that have brought about heritage management needs as well. Sorry, anything?
Yeah, and think as well about the saving heritage principle in there. You can wrap those things together actually, and we understand that it doesn't have to, that what you're doing doesn't always have to be directly directly about or in delivery of a specific heritage asset or thing. The reason that we're talking about this is because we know that it's difficult to run organisations that help to support and preserve and make these things accessible, and we want to make that easier.
Great, thank you. That was a great question. Any others?
Hiya. A really broad question. Being in the position where the organisation I work for is finishing a National Lottery Heritage Fund project, any advice for where we go next in terms of we're able to reapply? I saw that there was an example in the case study of an organisation who had reapplied off the back of the first one. So I suppose, is there any information around that, or?
I suppose I'd say, we're as I said at the beginning, we're a project funder, and so yes, organisations can come back to us for new projects after they've finished previous projects. That happens, but what we don't do is act as a kind of revenue funder or a core funder. So what's harder is coming back to us to do exactly the same thing as you were doing before. There needs to be, I think, a bit of reflection, evaluation, and development about what you then want to go on and do and develop. I don't know if Beth, you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, you absolutely can. I mean, and heritage needs change all the time, and we don't expect one project to be able to solve all of them. So it could be entirely unrelated to what you've done, that you have a new focus and a new need, and that project's gone really well, and maybe you're in a better position and you're happy with that. Or, as some of the case studies highlighted, they really delved into an area to give them some options and some evidence to make their decision making about what happens next. And I think when we see organizations come back to us after having one, we would really encourage you to look at being able to be clear, how is the project different, and what have you learned from the evaluation and that previous investment, so that it is a different project and we're getting you to the next step, whatever that looks like for you.
Thank you. Just a little bit time for one more question, if there are any. Great. Okie doke.